Hey, it's Lisa Leslie. How did I get here? I prepared for every game and for the years after.
Invest in your future with SPY, the original S&P 500 ETF from State Street, the official ETF partner of the WNBA. Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Visit statestreet.com/IM for prospectus containing this and other information. Read it carefully. SPY is subject to risks similar to those of stocks. All ETFs are subject to risk, including possible loss of principal. Alps Distributors, Inc. Distributor.
If your appliances can't handle the holiday hosting heat, December deal drops at Lowe's makes upgrading easy. Get up to 35% off select major appliances, and rewards members save an additional $40 on the Whirlpool electric range and the over-the-range microwave. Plus, get up to 60% off select ladders so you can deck all the halls. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 12/10. While supplies last, selection varies by location. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for details.
And away we go, episode 1215 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Wednesday, December 10th, 2025. It is the day on which the 3-10 Washington Commanders are beginning their practice week for their game at the 2-11 New York Giants this Sunday afternoon at 1. And Week 15 of the NFL's 2025 regular season. We'll see about the status of quarterback Jayden Daniels, off him in the Commanders' 31-0 loss at the Minnesota Vikings this past Sunday afternoon, returning from a 3-game absence caused by a dislocated left elbow, but then leaving the game off hurting the elbow. I hope that Daniels is good to go for this Sunday afternoon. I hope that he, in this game at the Giants, gets more than 4 drives. You know, that was it. The Commanders in the loss at the Vikings had just 7 offensive drives, including just 4 with Daniels at quarterback. That's crazy, but that's what happens when you have a terrible defense that gives up a 19-play, 98-yard touchdown drive that consumes 12 minutes, 1 second off the clock. Hello and welcome to this Wednesday installment of the Al Galdi podcast, on which we talk Commanders on every episode, no matter the time of year. Next segment, a conversation with a good friend of this podcast, Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Mark will give us an All-22 style deep dive on Jayden Daniels. A lot of talk in recent days about the season that Daniels is having, so let's get into this. Mark will provide a breakdown of Daniels' performance in the loss at the Vikings, and will assess Daniels' overall 2025 season and where he's at as an NFL quarterback. Sober, objective, nuanced, high-level conversation about Jayden Daniels with Mark Bullock next segment. Also on the show, I'll give you analysis of the continued struggles of Dan Quinn defenses against Shanahan-style offenses. Quinn, over his time as Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator and Washington Commanders head coach, has seen his defenses routinely get stomped by Shanahan-style offenses. The trend continued in the loss at the Vikings. What is up with this? By the way, the Commanders on Tuesday afternoon announced having signed receiver Chris Moore to the practice squad and having released receiver River Craycraft from the practice squad. The team this past Saturday afternoon announced having released Moore. This is the corresponding roster move to the team, activating receiver Noah Brown from the reserve/injured list. And on the show, we'll talk Virginia basketball. The number 24 Cavaliers, they on Tuesday night blew out Maryland Eastern Shore 84-60 at John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville, Virginia. Before we get to some feedback, we on Tuesday evening at the 2025 MLB Winter Meetings in Orlando, Florida, had the MLB Draft Lottery for the 2026 MLB Draft. The Baltimore Orioles got the number 7 overall pick. The Washington Nationals, who were ineligible for one of the top picks in the draft but still had ping pong balls in the lottery, got the number 11 overall pick. But how about this? The Nats' combination of ping pong balls was drawn shortly after the Chicago White Sox's combination was drawn for the number 1 overall pick. So the Nats would have gotten the number 2 overall pick. According to Baseball America's J.J. Cooper, the designated pool reporter who watched the actual lottery several hours prior to the televised event, the Nats combination of balls actually came up in 4 of the first 9 draws. Each time, the Nats were ruled ineligible and another draw was made. The Nats were ineligible because MLB has set the lottery up to where no team may participate in the lottery 3 consecutive years, and no team that is designated as a revenue-sharing payer as opposed to a revenue-sharing receiver may participate in the lottery in back-to-back years. The Nats won the lottery for the 2025 MLB draft, and the Nats are considered a revenue-sharing payer. The Nats at the 2023 MLB winter meetings as an ineligible team for one of the top picks in the 2024 MLB draft actually won the lottery, but the win didn't count. So if you are just going by the drawings of Nats ping pong balls in MLB draft lotteries over the last 4 years, the Nats would have held the second, first, and second overall picks in MLB drafts over a 4-year stretch. How about that draft lottery luck for the Nats? If only our Washington Wizards had this kind of draft lottery luck. Also, what I suspected would happen is happening. Old Dominion quarterback Colton Joseph is transferring. He on Tuesday morning announced that he has decided to enter the NCAA transfer portal. Zero surprise. Joseph has had a really good season that has set him up for a big money NIL deal. Old Dominion does have a bowl game that's just a week away. ODU versus South Florida in the Staff DNA Cure Bowl at Camping World Stadium in Orlando, Florida on Wednesday evening, December 17th at 5. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Feedback on the Commanders from Zim on X, right, Zim? I can't get over it just how barren the roster is. Feels like an impossible task to rebuild this in normal time. Feels like it'll take 3 to 4 more drafts to get into a decent spot, especially if the free agent talent pool is barren like it was last year at the beginning of the process. Thank you for that, Zim. From Chris Cranford on X, writes Chris, Adam Peters loved this roster going into the season. To me, that doesn't just mean he loved the starters. Some big self-scouting is needed across the board this offseason, top to bottom. Thank you for that, Chris. Yeah. General Manager Adam Peters, this past July 22nd, did a joint press conference with head coach Dan Quinn. During that presser, had this exchange between 7 News DC sports director Scott Abraham and Peters.
Adam, for you, comparing your feelings about the roster construction last year at this time versus to where you are today going into your second training camp in Washington. Give me your feelings, differences about just how you feel overall about the roster construction, what this team looks like right now compared to where it was last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think we're better. You know, I would, but really just it was cool to see the players that we hadn't been with last year get so much better and get so much closer last year and work together, and then all the players that we drafted get so much better, and then bringing in a lot of guys from through trades or free agency this year and see how those guys mesh together too. So really like impressed with the job that DQ's done in bringing everybody together. I think that's probably the coolest thing. And from year 0 to year 1 and then year 1 to year 2, continuing that. So I think we have a better roster. That doesn't always mean you're going to have more or less wins, but certainly really excited about the group that we have together, not just the talent, but just the people.
So Adam Peters was in no way cocky about the state of the Commanders roster, but he did say, quote, "I'd like to think we're better," end quote. And in fairness, I think that most of us, myself included, thought that the roster was better. And maybe it is. It's hard to evaluate the roster given all of the injuries, but we absolutely have to be open to the possibility that the roster isn't better, that the roster is fundamentally flawed. Too old, not enough speed, not enough physicality on defense. We have to be open to all of that. Adam Peters has to be open to all of that. But what is troubling me the most about Peters is the drafting. that the only player taken by him over his 2 NFL drafts as Commanders GM, who you right now would call a clear hit, is Jayden Daniels. And even he's having a bad second NFL season, but I still would call him a hit. There are some guys showing progress. Right tackle Josh Connerly Jr., linebacker Jordan McGee, but the regression of cornerback Mikey Sainristil and the regression of tackle/guard Brandon Coleman are concerning, and the lack of progress/impact from others is concerning. I mean, the Commanders in the 2024 NFL Draft had 3 second-round picks. The team with those 3 second-round picks took interior defensive lineman Johnny Newton, cornerback Mikey Sainristil, and tight end Ben Sinnott. Right now, it is entirely possible that Peters whiffed on all 3 of those picks. That's concerning. Email from Rich. Writes Rich. I know the league has become pass happy, but when your running back has a strong drive and gets you in the red zone, you feed him. On our first drive deep in the red zone, the obvious choice was to hand the ball to Rodriguez, repeat if necessary. Why anyone would choose to throw a pass to an offensive lineman escapes me. That puts us behind the ball, and we have to pass again. Did I mention it was Jayden's first drive in his first game back? Why not lean on a working run game to help Jayden get comfortable in his return? Why not let the offensive line keep pushing the other guys backward? Those big guys like that stuff. This is still a league that operates from the ball out. Kingsbury gets too cute at times. I wonder how the game would have gone if we had run the ball in the end zone on that first drive. Confidence is a funny thing. Momentum matters. Either way, we racked up another loss for Operation Loseout. Keep up the good work. Thank you for the email, Rich. I agree, and I say that as someone who is a big proponent of passing offense and as someone who is a big fan of offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury and as someone who thinks that he, given the circumstances, has done a good job this season, but Kingsbury was wrong not to give running back Chris Rodriguez Jr. more carries on that first Commanders offensive drive in the loss at the Vikings. Rodriguez on the drive had 4 carries for 31 yards, giving the team a second and goal at the 2. But Kingsbury then called 3 consecutive passing plays, each of which resulted in an incompletion. Now, Jayden Daniels on the first of the plays had offensive tackle Brandon Coleman open, but did not throw to him. And the last of the plays resulted in a drop by receiver Deebo Samuel Sr. So, in Kingsbury's defense, there on 2 of those 3 incompletions were completions to be made. But that can happen with passing plays. Chris Rodriguez in the loss at the Vikings, 10 carries for 52 yards and no targets, played on 42% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. He for the game had an overall grade per Pro Football Focus of 69. That's above average. 60 is average. Email from Sean. Right, Sean. Hello, Al. Hope and trust all is well with you and yours. I believe this whole email is reactionary, yet therapeutic. Indulge me for a bit. Sunday, I believe, can be summed up simply as Kevin O'Connell outcoached Dan Quinn and Brian Flores outcoached Cliff Kingsbury. However, this game and this season have brought me to another conclusion. If we get in our DeLorean, accelerate to 88 miles per hour, and garner the 1.21 gigawatts needed for fictitious time travel, I believe if we go 1 year into the future, this current coaching staff is no longer here. As good of a human being that Dan Quinn appears to be, I believe we have gone as far as we can with him as head coach. Last season was the anomaly, a perfect storm of good. This season is the perfect storm of bad. However, despite the debilitating injuries that this team has suffered, the coaching, or lack thereof, has been most concerning to me. I'll start with Dan Quinn. His last game as a defensive coordinator in Dallas was the divisional round loss to Green Bay. In that game, Quinn's defense gave up 48 points and 415 yards. You could argue that from that game on, the NFL has figured out his defense. He has put forward a historically bad defense this season. I used to think that our defense is just put not-so-good tight ends in Pro Bowls. But no, Al, now we provide at least 1 week career resuscitations to habitually bad bust-level quarterbacks. If we played J.J. McCarthy every week, he'd be a Hall of Famer. Which brings me to old Cliffy Cliff. The Commanders put up 419 net yards on Denver's defense the previous week. That's a top 3 defensive unit. However, this week, it was an awful game plan. I give credit for going under center a little bit more. I believe at one point the team was averaging 6 yards a carry, yet there was no real emphasis on the run after that first drive. That ended with 3 pass attempts from the 2. I am not one of these people who believes we need to be under center and run the ball 35 times and rev up that diesel. But Kingsbury consistently shows a stubbornness or unwillingness to adjust in games. I know that analytics and stats say otherwise, but the offense doesn't pass the eye test. Jayden could be developing bad habits of looking to extend plays when not necessary because Kingsbury isn't providing Jayden with answers to what Jayden is seeing from opposing defenses. And if I see one more bubble screen to a receiver, I'm going to lose it. I say all of this to say that I have no answers. However, what my eyes are seeing tells me that this Titanic is taking on water. Whether it's this offseason, next offseason, or the offseason after that, the USS Quinn is sinking. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. My only hope is change is made before Jayden's career is ruined in the process. Take care, Al. Keep providing the quality program you provide. Thank you for the email, Sean. Sunday was not a good day for the Commanders coaching staff. There's no doubt about that. I do still believe that Cliff Kingsbury, again, given the circumstances, has done a good job this season. And as I discussed on last Wednesday's show, episode 1210, the stats back that up. But Sunday was not a good day for Kingsbury. Have the Commanders maxed out with Dan Quinn as head coach? That's an interesting question. Maybe. I still think that the overwhelming number one reason for the team's bad season is injury, but I also think that Quinn has not done an impressive job this season. One of the things that a good head coach in any sport will do is get wins that he or she should not. Steal wins, coach up the team so that it rises up and pulls off some upsets. And this team has not done that at all. This team, off being walloped by injury, has fallen on its face. On Monday's show, episode 1213, brought up that Washington, even with Jay Gruden as head coach and even with Ron Rivera as head coach, pulled off upset wins that weren't supposed to happen but did happen. The 2017 overtime win at the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football on October 27th, 2014. The 23-17 win at the Pittsburgh Steelers on December 7th, 2020. The 29-19 win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at FedEx Field on November 14th, 2021. Where has any of that been this season? And that, to me, has been really disappointing. Cash App. It is the best way to make sure that your financial transactions are safe. You this holiday season can stay one step ahead of scams and keep your money secure with Cash App. Cash App's 24/7 fraud monitoring helps detect and alert you for unusual card activity should someone gain access to your card so you can act fast if something seems off. You also can lock or unlock your Cash App card instantly right in the app for extra control and peace of mind. And if you're about to send money to someone for a deal that's too good to be true, and Cash App flags the deal as a potential scam, Cash App will warn you before you send the money. Cash App is here for you, and for a limited time only, new Cash App customers can use Cash App's exclusive code to earn some additional cash for real. Just download Cash App, use the exclusive referral code SECURE10 in your profile, send $5 to a friend within 14 days, and you'll get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App. Cash App is a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partner or partners. Prepaid debit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Promotions provided by Cash App, a Block Inc. brand. Visit cash.app/legal/podcast for full disclosures.
At Boar's Head, we make game day entertaining elevated and effortless. Whether you order catering platters ahead from your local deli or create your own spread with premium deli meats and cheeses, you're sure to impress your guests with the very best. Fan favorites like Oven Gold Turkey, paired with our classic Vermont cheddar, are sure to score big. Game-winning flavor in every bite. Boar's Head, committed to craft since 1905.
The best part of holiday gifting? Giving them something they'll use all year. During December deal drops at Lowe's, save $40 on select Craftsman V20 tools, now just $59. Plus, all rewards members get free standard shipping. Shop new December deal drops every week this month. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 12/10. While supplies last. Free shipping excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Exclusions and more terms apply. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Subject to change. Visit Lowe's.com/shipping terms for details.
If you are listening to this podcast via Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can rate the podcast with a star rating. 5-star ratings are greatly appreciated. They help us out a lot. Thank you for doing them. The Washington Commanders, they on Wednesday are beginning their practice week for their game at the New York Giants this Sunday afternoon at 1. On Wednesday, hopefully, we'll get a clearer picture of whether quarterback Jayden Daniels will start this game, though what seems to be the case is that he will. Daniels, in the team's 31-0 loss at the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday afternoon, returned from a 3-game absence caused by a dislocated left elbow. He, in the loss at the Vikings, hurt the elbow, causing him to leave the game. Did not go back into the game, but head coach Dan Quinn, during his post-game press conference on Sunday afternoon, said that Daniels could have gone back into the game, but Quinn decided not to put Daniels back in the game. The Commanders on Monday announced that Daniels is scheduled to do the starting quarterback post-practice press conference on Wednesday afternoon, and Quinn, during his day after the game press conference on Monday afternoon, said that there with Daniels was soreness but no long-term concerns. It, of course, has been a disappointing second NFL season for Jayden Daniels. He has played in just 7 of the Commanders' 13 games in this regular season due to 3 different injuries: a left knee injury, a right hamstring injury, and a dislocated left elbow. He has left 4 of the 7 games due to getting hurt. Daniels, for this regular season through Week 14, is number 23 out of 31 qualified NFL quarterbacks in ESPN's total QBR, 45.9. We welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast Commanders analyst Mark Bullock. Mark is exceptional at talking Commanders from an X's and O's standpoint. He does tremendous Commanders All-22 breakdowns. You can read his work on his Substack, Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Mark has written for The Athletic and for The Washington Post. He also is a Commanders fan. You can follow Mark on X at Mark Bullock NFL. Hey, Mark, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing relatively well considering the season. How about you?
Doing well. 3-10 Commanders at the 2-11 Giants this Sunday afternoon at 1. Commanders in possession of the number 6 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. Giants in possession of the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. A bunch of teams are bunched in tight, but the Commanders are 1 game out from having the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. Are you with Operation Lose Out 2.0? Are you like me, wanting the Commanders to play well, but also okay with the team losing?
It would be nice for them to not be losing out. That would be pretty tough to swallow, but and I think if they lose out, then there's potentially more jobs on the line than we're anticipating right now. But at this point, it's pretty clear that the best thing for the long term of the franchise is probably going to be losing out in terms of getting a higher draft pick and being able to, trade back and acquire more picks. But, there is the whole, trying to build a winning culture, and you don't want to be, telling guys to lose, or nobody's telling them to lose. But I think you can tank in a way of, we're playing the young guys, we're seeing what the young guys have, and given that they've not wanted to play the young guys all year, it suggests they don't think the young guys have enough to help them win. So that's probably the way they'll go now.
It is going to be interesting to see if head coach Dan Quinn now changes who's playing, given that the loss at the Vikings did officially eliminate the Commanders from NFC East contention. This off the team already having been eliminated from wild card contention. So Jayden Daniels, you on Monday on your Substack put up a breakdown of his performance in the loss at the Vikings. Headline, quote, "How did Jayden Daniels hold up against Vikings' aggressive pressure package?" End quote. Daniels in the game went just 9 for 20 for just 78 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. He took 1 sack, which was a scramble sack for a mere 1-yard loss. He had 4 carries for for 16 yards. His advanced stats were not good. Overall grade per Pro Football Focus of just 55.7. Total QBR per ESPN of just 11.1. Expected points added per play per RBSDM.com of minus 0.33. What did you see from Daniels in this game?
Yeah, my first reaction while watching the game live was that this is not very good. Going back and rewatching the All-22 of it, I felt like it wasn't as bad as I necessarily remembered it being during the game. When it's in the game and you score no points, it emotionally it feels pretty terrible. But when you step back and watch it objectively, like Jayden Daniels had 4 drives, 4 possessions of the ball. On the first one, they drove down the field really well. They should have had a touchdown, and I know everyone wants to kill Cliff Kingsbury for not running the ball 4 times on the goal line, but he did call the play action pass to Brandon Coleman, which was there, but Daniels hesitated, and then it wasn't. So that should have been a touchdown. And then on the 4th down, he hit Debo in the hands, and Debo dropped it. So that should have also been a touchdown. So they should have come away with a touchdown on that drive. They had a 3 and out, which, it happens. It sucks, but it does happen. Then they had the 2-minute drill just before the half where the Vikings blitzed a ton and really dialed up the pressure. And we'll get to some of that. And then so that fizzled out. And then they had a drive out of the half where they worked their way down to the red zones, somewhat a little bit fortunately with a few penalties here and there, but they still worked their way down to the red zone. And they probably would have kicked a field goal if the score was 14-7, if they'd scored that first touchdown. Then you're talking about 2 possessions where they score on 2 out of 4 possessions and it's 14-10, and then it's suddenly not looking anywhere near as bad as what it felt like because they didn't score any points in the end. So I don't think it was as bad as what it looked. I did think there were some positives to take out of it from Jayden Daniels in terms of his ability to trust his protection better than I think I've ever seen him do it, really. The Vikings are a very, very aggressive defense. Brian Flores really loves to blitz in any sense and really aggressive pressure packages. And Jayden Daniels typically in the past against blitzes, kind of fades away, drops back a little bit too deep in the pocket, which invites those edge rushers to get a little bit more pressure on him, and then he ends up having to roll out and scramble. And in this game, I thought he did a really nice job of trusting his guys to block, holding his point in the pocket, and even climbing up into the pocket when he needed to. So I thought there were some positives in that regard, but obviously there was some, a few missed passes. As I talked about, there was the potential touchdown to Brandon Coleman that was the same play as as Daniel's first career touchdown pass to Trent Scott last year. It was the same play. That one was open, and I don't know why he hesitated, but he did, and then that window shut. So there was a few plays like that where it's like, I'm guessing you probably could put it down to a bit of rust that he hadn't played in a few weeks and what have you. But yeah, I don't think it was as bad as being shut out seems. I think that the fact that the Vikings had 2 extremely long drives and there was only 4 possessions made it look worse than it actually was. And yeah, I do think there were a few positives to take out of it.
Jayden Daniels' final play in the loss at the Vikings, the interception. 4th and 3 for the Commanders at the Vikings 19 with 8:24 left in the third quarter. Daniels was intercepted by edge defender Andrew Van Ginkel, who generated a 40-yard return. Daniels took a shotgun snap and, while being pressured, had his pass tipped by Van Ginkel, who then caught the ball, and Daniels, while chasing Van Ginkel on the return, got shoved to the ground by cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, and Daniels landed on his left arm after the play, was clutching his left arm. It looked like Daniels checked to this play. What happened on that play?
Yeah, so to talk about that interception, I think you'll want to go back to how the Vikings are really aggressive with their pressure packages, so that they will constantly line up 7 or 8 guys on the line of scrimmage and show cover 0, and they're one of the few teams in the NFL that will blitz cover 0 on any given down and any given distance. So you have to respect that there is a chance that they run cover 0 or something similar on any given play, and when they show that look, you have to be prepared for it. And earlier in the game, the Vikings had shown that look quite a few times, and Washington had a few different answers for it. Sometimes there was a quick out to Terry McLaurin that they had an answer for on one play. There was a 3rd and 14, I think, where the Vikings showed that look, and Jayden Daniels actually checked into a quick screen to Deebo Samuel, where he had Zach Ertz and Terry McLaurin blocking on the edge for him, and he just threw a quick screen out to the flat, and Deebo went and picked up that 14 yards with some good blocking in front of him, and they got a first down. And I think that's essentially what they were trying to do on that interception. Was they got into that same look, and they got the same look from the defense, where it was looking like they were going to run cover zero. So he went up to the line of scrimmage and he sort of changed the play, and you could see Terry McLaurin motioned outside, and they were trying to run a quick tunnel screen to Terry McLaurin. And unfortunately, they forgot one of the golden rules when you play against the Vikings is you don't check to a screen against Van Ginkel, because he blows up screens and intercepts them and all the time. And he's done it against Washington in the past. I think it was Sam Howell that when Van Ginkel was with the Dolphins, he had a very similar play and intercepted, and I think he took it back for a touchdown against Sam Howell. So he's one of those guys that you don't do that to. He's too alert to those kind of things, and he read the play. Again, it was very similar to when Jayden had that answer to the cover zero look before, where he called a screen to Deebo. This time he's called a screen to Terry, and Van Ginkel kind of picked up on it, and it was to his side, so he kind of jumped it and intercepted it. That's kind of what happened in that one. You can understand it. It was clearly that was one of the ways they wanted to deal with those cover zero looks, was to check into those screens. So I think he kind of, in theory, he did the right thing. He sees that cover zero look. When you get cover zero, one of the ways to beat it is a quick screen to the flat. He just didn't account for, Van Ginkel being Van Ginkel.
I mentioned that Jayden Daniels in the loss at the Vikings had 4 carries for 16 yards. Each of the 4 carries was a scramble, as the Commanders, with Daniels in the game, appeared to have little to no read option, perhaps to protect him. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, and most of his runs were scrambles. Some of them were, stepping up in the pocket and avoiding some pressure, and some of them were from clean pockets that he didn't need to run. But yeah, they certainly seem to go away a little bit from the read option stuff, and they were actually running from under center a little bit more than they had done. And they'd actually run the ball pretty effectively for quite a large part of that game. And I think you can have a valid criticism of Cliff Kingsbury that, one way to beat cover zero and aggressive defenses is run the ball right at them. And there was a few plays where they did, and they had some success. And I would have liked to have seen them do that a little bit more. But they didn't necessarily get into the read option stuff. I think part of that obviously is, potentially trying to protect Jayden a little bit. Part of that is probably also, you don't necessarily want to be using read option against really aggressive defenses that, have the potential to go cover zero at any given play, because they have a free man running at the quarterback, and that's not an ideal look for a read option play. So, I think that probably part of it is probably, trying to protect him, but part of it is also it's not necessarily a great scheme to run against a very aggressive defense like that.
The Commanders in each of their last 2 games have faced a really good defense. Why is it that the Commanders' offense in the 27-26 overtime loss to the Denver Broncos at Northwest Stadium on Sunday Night Football on November 30th did well against that good defense, but the offense in this 31-0 loss at the Minnesota Vikings this past Sunday afternoon was so bad, especially considering that the QB1, Jayden Daniels, and the number 3 receiver, Noah Brown, were back for the game of the Vikings, off each guy having been out due to injury?
So it's about the styles of defenses that those two teams run. They're both very, very good defenses. And the Broncos defense is probably slightly more consistent, whereas the Vikings defense is a little more trying to force the issue. So the Broncos typically stick to 4 and 5 man rushes, and Washington's offensive line did a really nice job picking those up and holding, doing a really nice job of holding protection against those guys. And when you can hold up protection against 4 or 5 man rushes, you can, find passes. And they did a really good job with a quick game and being really efficient, and that's how they were able to move the ball, and they ran the ball well as well. So they had a really efficient offense against Denver. Whereas against the Vikings really try to force the issue. As I talked about, they're super, super aggressive. They like to run cover zero a lot, but they will come up with various different blitz packages throughout the game. So it's not just cover zero. They will send 5 and 6 man pressures a lot. They'll do a lot of stunting up front where you'll see offensive linemen getting picked, and you'll see the linebackers mugged up in the A gaps and running cross stunts where the center is wrong whichever way he goes, and they get matchups on the running back. It's a very, very aggressive and very well thought out and schemed defense from Brian Flores. So it's a lot harder to stay on track and be efficient unless you run the ball really well at them. And again, that is I think a fairly valid criticism you could have of Cliff in this game, is that he didn't necessarily run the ball consistently enough. But again, if you talk about Jayden Daniels throws that pass to Coleman when it was open, and then they kick a field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 1 where he got interception, it would have been 14-10, and Jayden Daniels wouldn't have been hurt, and they would have had more possessions. So that is kind of the way of the NFL. It can be 1 or 2 plays can change things pretty drastically and change the narrative pretty drastically. But I think that is why. It's because the Vikings play a very different brand of defense. It's a lot harder to be efficient and stay on track and pick up your short, quick plays against them because they blitz so aggressively. Whereas, Denver will sit off a little bit more. That they kind of are trying to constrict you and make you dink and duck your way down the field and be super efficient and not get penalized and get backed up. And Washington just did a really good job of being efficient in that game. Whereas Vikings just kind of force the issue and blitz the hell out of you, basically.
Much more with Mark Bullock in moments. Here is an outstanding book for you if you're a Washington fan, or for a Washington fan who you care about this holiday season. RFK All Access by Scott Cunningham, who served as a photographer for NFL properties for years and who photographed the Redskins extensively during their glory days in the 1980s and early 1990s. Scott, via RFK All Access, has put together a compilation of his best Redskins photos, many of which are behind-the-scenes photos. Joe Gibbs, Jack Kent Cook, Richie Pettibone, the Hogs, the Posse, Sonny Sam and Frank, all and so many more are featured in this book, which is 392 pages of glorious Skins history, 5 pounds of Redskins gold. If you are a serious Washington fan, if you are a Skins historian, this book is a must-have. Makes for a terrific addition to any Skins-themed man cave. Also makes for a great gift. I have the book. It is sensational. Heck, this is a book that has been endorsed by Joe Gibbs himself. Quote, "This is a great book filled with great memories," end quote. The book now is available in ebook form, and the book now is available for an all-time low price. Take advantage of this special holiday season sale. RFK All Access. You can get the book by visiting rfkallaccess.com. And when you order the book, mention in the notes section that Al Galdi sent you. Doing that helps out this podcast a lot. That's rfkallaccess.com. rfkallaccess.com. And mention that Al Galdi sent you. We're talking with Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Jayden Daniels, he is not having as good of a season as he did in his all-time great rookie season last season. When it comes to why, there's a lot to process, him having dealt with 3 injuries, the receiving core having been hit hard by injuries, the Commanders' defense having been horrendous. But bottom line, when it comes to how you feel about Jayden Daniels now as compared to at the end of last season, do you feel better, worse, or the same?
I still feel pretty optimistic that he could be a very, very good NFL quarterback. I think last year was so good, and the highs were so high that we were all kind of in dreamland a little bit. Like, this guy is a top 3 NFL quarterback potentially, and I think he can still reach that. I think this year we've seen a little bit more of the concerns that, like, my number one concern with him coming out of college was the hits that he took, and whether he could stay on the field. And to his credit, in college, the hits that he took, he always got back up from, and he hardly missed time in college. in the NFL, that hasn't quite been the case. And I don't think, I think he's been a lot more conservative in the NFL than he was in college. In college, he was completely reckless. Like the play that everyone remembers is the one where he tried to leapfrog a defensive lineman running right up the middle of the field. It was insane, really. And he hasn't done that in the NFL yet. He has been more willing to kind of step out of bounds and throw the ball away and not try to cut inside and pick up first down yards or whatever. But he still has exposed himself to a few more hits than you would like. And it's not like he's consistently taking the same hit to the same area and injuring the same part of his body every time. You know, all of these injuries have been different parts. Like last year it was the ribs. This year it's been the elbow and the quad or the hamstring or whatever and stuff like that. So it's been different areas, which tends to make me think that it's just kind of unlucky. And it's not like all of the hits are coming from him scrambling. Like a couple of them have been in the pocket and stuff like that. So it feels a bit just like it's been unlucky, and I'm not overly concerned about that, but that would be the bigger concern, is that can he stay healthy enough and play enough games where he can recognize his potential? Because we saw his potential last year. We've seen this year where he's been so much in and out of the lineup that he's not been able to build the same rhythm that he did last year. Now we've seen glimpses of it, like the Chargers game this year back in week 5. Like he came back from an injury, he had some rust in that first quarter, but the remaining 3 quarters of that game he was outstanding. I would have said it was probably the best 3 quarters of his career, in terms of his, mental processing and being able to get the ball out properly and scrambling to extend plays rather than to run, and only running when he had to. He was outstanding in that game. And so we could see that the talent is still there, but when you're so on and off the field yourself, and also, all the receivers are constantly getting injured, you're not getting to practice with any of those guys, it really hurts your ability to build a rhythm and a tempo to the season and get into your groove. So I think that is the biggest concern, is can he stay on the field frequently enough to build that rhythm that he did last year? I think if he can, then they'll be fine. I think they have at least now the foundation of an offensive line that they believe that can protect him. And I think we saw in this game that he is starting to trust that, and trust those guys to block for him. And he's willing to stay in the pocket a little bit more and not drift backwards as much as he did previously. I thought that was a big takeaway from this game, was that he was showing more trust in his protection, and he was more willing to maneuver within the pocket rather than just looking to kind of bail out of it and scramble. So I think those are positives. And if that continues, then, the sky is still the limit for him. But you do still have just that kind of nagging concern that you're right. He has been injured a couple of times this year, and he is prone to taking more hits than other guys. And are those things, it's not necessarily linked. Like it can just be freak injuries, and hopefully that is the case. And, he'll be fine in the future, but you never really know.
You a few times now have alluded to Jayden Daniels scrambling when he doesn't have to scramble. Daniels for the 2024 regular season was number 1 among all qualified NFL quarterbacks in scramble rate per Sumer Sports, 12.17%. Daniels for this regular season through week 14 is number 1 among all qualified NFL quarterbacks in scramble rate per Sumer Sports, 15.57%. Does he too often scramble when he doesn't need to scramble?
There can definitely be times of that. I think last year he found the balance of that down the stretch last year, where, once he had got into that groove and he was really feeling comfortable with the guys that he was out there, and he was constantly having McLaurin and Ertz and Noah Brown or Zacchaeus, guys that he trusted and had a built-up relationship with, and was getting reps with every week. He was getting more into a groove of trusting those guys and not having to scramble, or when he did scramble, it was to extend plays and find passes. I think when he is kind of off a little bit and has been in and out of the lineup, missed some time and feeling a little bit rusty, I think his natural instinct is to lean more on his legs, because he knows his legs can bail him out of a lot of situations. And yeah, he might miss a pass down the field that he could have if he just scrambled to extend the play, but he knows his legs can pick him up 5 or 10 yards and move the chains and keep himself ahead of the chains, and keep drives alive doing that. So I think it's still a really valuable asset for him to have. But yeah, it can be a thing that he leans on a little bit too much when he's not quite in the right rhythm. I think that's a pretty good indicator of how confident he's feeling himself. You can see that when he steps up and he starts kind of scrambling, if he immediately drops his eyes and starts running, you can tell that he's kind of feeling like he needs to do it a little bit more himself. Whereas if he starts rolling out to the side and extending the play and looking for a pass down the field, that's when you start feeling like, okay, he's feeling confident. He's feeling like he can, extend plays and keep his eyes downfield and find guys. So that tends to be a pretty good indicator of where he's at mentally in a game, and how he's feeling at that point in time.
Every indication is that the Commanders are not shutting down Jayden Daniels for the season, and I'm happy about that. He needs work, he needs reps, he needs to develop further. Are there other specific areas in which you see opportunity for improvement for Daniels?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always places everyone can improve. Like Tom Brady always talked about, he was always working on his footwork and improving even his final year of his career. So if he can do that, then everyone can look to improve every year. And the main things for Jayden would be part of the issues that he had would be kind of falling away from throws. And we saw at the start of this year, he was a little bit off. He would fall away from throws when there was nobody in his face. And that caused him to be a little bit off with throws being, especially kind of between the hash marks over the middle. He was a little bit behind targets. Sometimes it was a little bit high. It was just not quite as accurate and as on point as he was last year. And he did still did the same thing last year where he was fading away from throws a little bit, but it was a little bit more obvious this year. And it's not that you can't be accurate when you're fading away from throws, it's that it makes you less consistently accurate. And we saw that this year. So that would be something that I'd like to see him, be more willing to stand in the pocket, trust his protection as we saw in this game, and step into throws rather than kind of fading away from them, because that will lead to a little bit more consistently accurate throws. And that is something that he generally is pretty good at. Like when he stands in there and just makes his throw, he is generally very accurate and can be very pinpoint with where he wants to place balls. And we've seen that in a lot of games, where he'll deliberately throw to a low and away from a defender to protect the ball and that kind of thing. So I think that is a strength of his game, but it's something that he needs to make sure he's not fading away from throws to enable himself to keep that accuracy and not sort of just lose points on it. So that would be something. And then just, the consistent staying with plays where he can scramble to pass instead of scramble to run. As I talked about, it's kind of a little bit of a tell of where he's at mentally in a game, is whether he's feeling confident and really feeling it. You can tell he sort of starts to scramble to pass and find throws down the field off script. And that's when he's really, really dangerous, and that's when the Commanders are really at their best. But when he's kind of scrambling and immediately just taking off running, that's when you can feel like he's just kind of trying to take over the game, or feeling like he needs to lean on his legs a little bit too much. And that's when he's missing. He quite often misses a few opportunities down the field. So those would be the aspects where I'd like to see continued improvement from him.
I think what's also tough is that Jayden Daniels this season, with the exception of the Commanders' last win, the 27-10 win at the Los Angeles Chargers on October 5th, has not put on the Superman cape. He has not carried the Commanders the way that he did last season. And maybe that's an unfair standard, but we last season routinely saw him be Superman. He, with the exception of the win at the Chargers, has not done that this season.
Yeah, I would say there's been flashes of it and glimpses of it. I think it's something that is hard to come out cold from, being injured and coming back into a game and being in and out of the lineup and not practicing consistently. I think that is something that is really hard to do, is to just put on that cape and become Superman. Whereas last year he had that consistent rhythm of practice every week. And I think, another part that might be somewhat underrated is last year they had a lot of, 1 p.m. Sunday kickoffs, and they had a consistent rhythm to a week. Whereas this year they've had primetime games. There's suddenly it's a Sunday night game, it's a Monday night game, it's a Thursday game, it's West Coast games where it's 4 o'clock kickoffs instead of 1 o'clock kickoffs and stuff like that. So they've not necessarily had that consistent rhythm. I know from my perspective, being in the UK where, in Sweden now, where games when you kick off at 1 p.m. and it's 7 p.m. for us, and when it's a primetime game, it's 2 a.m. I know my sleep pattern's been been messed up the whole season because of that. So I imagine it must have an impact on those guys as well. So I think he's not really been able to find that rhythm this year. And we can kind of go into each and every aspect of it. I feel like there is an obvious answer to that, which is the injuries have stopped him from getting into those rhythms. And I hesitate to really dive into it more than that, because I think that's most likely the biggest impact of it is, he's been injured, he's been in and out of the lineup, and his weapons have also been injured in and out of the lineup, so he's not had any sort of rapport with those guys. I kind of feel like that's predominantly the main issue here.
Final question. So there is a much larger conversation that we need to have about the Commanders' defense and where the team goes from here with a defense that has been so bad. But in talking about the Vikings defense under defensive coordinator Brian Flores, his blitz-happy ways, I mean, the Vikings for this regular season through Week 14 are number 1 in the NFL by miles in blitz percentage per Sport Radar, 43.3. Now, there's definite risk in doing defense that way, but would you like to see whoever is the Commanders' next defensive coordinator be like Flores and blitz a ton?
It's a hell of a lot of fun to watch, and when it works, it's brilliant. And you see it pretty often with the Vikings. They will go and blitz the hell out of teams, and it will really cause some issues up front. And it's not just the fact that they will commit rushers to the blitz; it's that they will run the pick stunts and stuff up front that make it really, really hard for those guys up front to protect. I am sure every offensive coordinator in the league, whenever they see that they're working against Brian Flores this week, is like, "Oh God, I've got to figure out a protection plan for this guy," and they hate it. So that is certainly an appealing aspect to it. But that you're right, there is certainly risks to it, and the Vikings have seen some of that sometimes, where you call an all-out blitz and you leave a guy one-on-one outside, and if you have a top-tier wide receiver that can win that one-on-one with a quick slant, that can turn into a 40, 50, 60-yard touchdown if they break one tackle, right? So there is risks to that. Like in a ideal world where you have a blank slate, that kind of aggressive style of defense is a lot of fun, and I would like to see that. But you have to be able to fit it to your personnel, right? And I think what we've seen from Washington this year is they've not had the guys that can hold up in man coverage when they try to blitz, right? So I don't think that's necessarily the right style for Washington as things stand. I think they would like to be able to get that way, but they've not had the guys to play man coverage. So I probably wouldn't necessarily be going that direction with the current personnel, but I think you're in for a major overhaul on the defensive side of the ball this year, so this offseason. So who knows, maybe they do go down that path and they try to build up a defense for a guy like that.
What the Commanders do with defensive coordinator is going to be one of the biggest storylines with this team next month. Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Mark, thanks, and we'll talk soon.
Of course, talk soon.
All right, the Nace Law Group. Accident and injury lawyers, it will fight for you and win for you. Just recently, an $8 million jury verdict in Baltimore City Circuit Court in a case in which the Nace Law Group represented the family of a 42-year-old man who died after a simple procedure. Lead attorney Chris Nace is a big Commanders fan and a big supporter of this podcast, and his firm wins trials. If you have a case, contact the Nace Law Group. Call 202-902-7611 or visit Washington, D.C., injurylawyers.com and tell the Nace Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. The Nace Law Group is tremendous. It is a Washington, D.C.-based family law firm that handles medical malpractice, personal injury, birth injury, legal malpractice, and consumer protection cases, offering aggressive advocacy for victims in Washington, D.C. and West Virginia. The Nace Law Group fights for victims of all kinds of situations, including victims of errors made during diagnosis, during surgery, or with medication, victims of injuries caused by dangerous medications or medical devices, as well as defective auto parts, victims of accidents involving cars, trucks, bikes, or motorcycles, victims of deceptive trade practices and false advertising, heck, victims of shady lawyers. If your attorney acts in bad faith, is unethical in his or her counsel, or is negligent in his or her work, you could have a claim for legal malpractice. The Nace Law Group has represented corporate clients throughout the region. If you feel that you've been wronged, if you think that you've been wronged but aren't sure, contact the Nace Law Group and schedule a no-obligation appointment. Call 202-902-7611 or visit Washington, D.C. injurylawyers.com and tell the Nace Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. That's 202-902-7611 or Washington, D.C. injurylawyers.com and tell the Nace Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. The Nace Law Group, Accident and Injury Lawyers. There is a trend that the Washington Commanders' 31-0 loss at the Minnesota Vikings this past Sunday afternoon continued. And I'm not talking about the trend of the Commanders' 8-game losing streak or the trend of the team's horribly disappointing season or anything specific to just this season. The trend is Dan Quinn defenses getting worked by Shanahan-style offenses. Mike Shanahan, he was the Redskins' executive vice president / head coach for the 2010 through 2013 seasons. His son, Kyle Shanahan, currently the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. He was the Skins' offensive coordinator for the 2010 through 2013 seasons. So the Skins, during those seasons, as you may have heard, had a bunch of offensive assistants who have gone on to be quality NFL head coaches. I mentioned Kyle, also Los Angeles Rams head coach Sean McVay, Green Bay Packers head coach Matt LaFleur, Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel. Additionally, another former Skins offensive coordinator, Kevin O'Connell, he has gone on to become the head coach of the Vikings, and he is part of the Shanahan coaching tree. Also, Cincinnati Bengals head coach Zach Taylor is part of the Shanahan coaching tree. You can always email me, the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Email from John Granlund, writes John, "Hey Al, football is stupid, and we should never watch it again. I had not been on the fire Quinn train, but I'm sick of the routine. Yes, the defense sucks, but it really sucks against teams that run a Shanahan-style offense, and has for years. I had Grok do a little analysis for me. I copied below. Thank you for the email, John. Grok is incredible. Not always entirely accurate, but yeah, Grok is incredible. So I actually was thinking about doing a segment on this because, yeah, this has become a thing. Dan Quinn defense is getting worked by Shanahan-style offenses. Dan Quinn was the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator for the 2021 through 2023 seasons. Here were the Cowboys' regular season rankings in total defense per DVOA with Dan Quinn as defensive coordinator. 2021, number 4. 2022, number 4. 2023, number 5. So all three defenses were good. Quinn did a really good job as Cowboys defensive coordinator, and yet Quinn, as Cowboys defensive coordinator, had problems against Shanahan-style offenses. January 16th, 2022, a 23-17 home loss to the Kyle Shanahan head-coached San Francisco 49ers in the wild card round of the NFL playoffs. The Niners went 6 for 13 on third downs, had a yards per play of 5.41. January 22nd, 2023, a 19-12 loss at the Kyle Shanahan head coach San Francisco 49ers in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. The Niners went 7 for 14 on third downs, though that loss was more on the Cowboys offense. But October 8th, 2023, a 42-10 loss at the Kyle Shanahan head coach San Francisco 49ers. The Niners put up 421 total net yards of offense, averaged 6.28 yards per play, and went 6 for 11 on third downs. How about Quinn's final game as Cowboys defensive coordinator? January 14th, 2024, a 48-32 home loss to to the Matt LaFleur head-coached Green Bay Packers in the wild card round of the NFL playoffs. The Packers put up 415 total net yards of offense, averaged 7.69 yards per play, and went 6 for 10 on third downs. You look at Dan Quinn as Commanders head coach. September 23rd, 2024, a 38-33 win at the Zach Taylor head coached Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football. The Commanders won despite allowing the Bengals to generate 436 total net yards of offense, average 7.27 yards per play, and go 6 for 10 on third downs. This past September 11th, the 27-18 loss at the Matt LaFleur head-coached Green Bay Packers on Thursday Night Football. The Commanders allowed the Packers to generate 404 total net yards of offense, average 6.41 yards per play, and go 5 for 12 on third downs. This despite two starting offensive linemen for the Packers, right tackle Zach Tom and left guard Aaron Banks being inactive for this game due to injury. This past November 2nd, a 38-14 loss to the Seattle Seahawks at Northwest Stadium on Sunday Night Football. The Seahawks offensive coordinator is Clint Kubiak. He is very much a Shanahan disciple. The Commanders allowed the Seahawks to generate 418 total net yards of offense, average a whopping 8.71 yards per play, and go 7 for 11 on third downs. Just a few weeks ago, November 16th, the 16-13 overtime loss to the Mike McDaniel head-coached Miami Dolphins in Madrid, Spain. For all of the talk of the Commanders' defense being better in that game, they allowed Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa to complete 70% of his pass attempts and have a yards per pass attempt of 8.55, and allowed Dolphins running backs Devon Achane, Ollie Gordon II, and Jalen Wright to combine for 31 carries for 169 yards and a touchdown. And now, this past Sunday afternoon, December 7th, the 31-0 loss at the Kevin O'Connell head-coached Minnesota Vikings. The Commanders allowed a Vikings offense that had been so bad to go 6 for 11 on third downs, 2 for 2 on fourth downs, and 4 for 4 in the red zone. The Commanders got picked apart by Vikings quarterback J.J. McCarthy, who had been reeling. McCarthy in this game, 16 for 23 for 163 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. He had 6 carries for 19 yards, and the Commanders' run defense was bad. They allowed Vikings running backs Aaron Jones Sr., Jordan Mason, and Xavier Scott to combine for 28 carries for 143 yards and a touchdown. That works out to a yards per carry of 5.12. Yeah, this is the thing. Dan Quinn defense is getting worked by Shanahan-style offenses. The tenets of the Shanahan-style offense include wide zone running schemes, a lot of play action passes, a lot of pre-snap motion, quick rhythm throws. It's hard to say if those specific things give Quinn's defenses problems or if the problems are more personnel-based. But the facts are the facts. The history is the history. Way too many instances of Dan Quinn defenses getting worked by Shanahan-style offenses. This is a problem. This is a big problem because Shanahan-style offenses are all over the NFL, and wouldn't you know, 4 of the best teams in the NFC this regular season are teams with Shanahan-style offenses. The Sean McVay head-coached Los Angeles Rams, the Clint Kubiak offensive-coordinated Seattle Seahawks, the Matt LaFleur head-coached Green Bay Packers, and the Kyle Shanahan head-coached San Francisco 49ers. Funny how that works. Catering by Uptown. It provides catering to perfection. Whatever event you're planning, a wedding, a holiday party, whatever, visit cateringbyuptown.com. Mention that Al Galdi sent you and see what Catering by Uptown can do for you. Catering by Uptown provides both great service and a great price. Catering by Uptown is a family business. It is run by the Pereiras, who are great Commanders fans and loyal supporters of this podcast. Catering by Uptown specializes in handling everything so that you don't have to. Catering by Uptown understands that special events deserve to be celebrated in style and thus takes care of every detail so that you can enjoy your event. Great service, amazing cuisine, and reliability are the foundation of what makes Catering by Uptown one of the most referred caterers throughout Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Northern Virginia. And know this, if you go to cateringbyuptown.com and click on venues, you can set up your own personal tour of one of Catering by Uptown's premier venues, including outstanding waterfront venues. Catering by Uptown offers the ability to coordinate services at over 100 of the best reception halls, vineyards, farms, historic homes, event venues, banquet facilities, and wedding venues in the area. Visit cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. That's cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you.
Hey, it's Lisa Leslie. How did I get here? I prepared for every game and for the years after.
Invest in your future with SPY, the original S&P 500 ETF from State Street, the official ETF partner of the WNBA. Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Visit statestreet.com/IM for prospectus containing this and other information. Read it carefully. SPY is subject to risks similar to those of stocks. All ETFs are subject to risk, including possible loss of principal. Alps Distributors, Inc. Distributor.
Whether you're gifting, decorating, or treating yourself, Lowe's December deal drops are here to help you save more all month long. Get up to 50% off select holiday decor. Plus, get up to 45% off select tools and accessories. Shop new December deal drops every week this month and get so much more out of your holidays. Lowe's, we help, you save. Selection varies by location while supplies last.
Let's talk college basketball. Virginia, in its first season with Ryan Odom as head coach, continues to score and continues to win. The number 24 Cavaliers improved to 9-1 in the 2025-2026 regular season with an 84-60 rout of Maryland Eastern Shore at John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville, Virginia on Tuesday night. The Cavs have scored at least 80 points in 9 of 10 games in this regular season. UVA never trailed. The Wahoos went 13 for 31 on threes and 17 for 31 on twos, had 16 assists versus 7 turnovers. 6 UVA players each scored at least 8 points. And the Hoos played defense. They held Maryland Eastern Shore to just 3 for 12 on threes and totaled 11 steals in generating 15 turnovers. So no game for UVA for more than a week. But next up for Virginia, home to Maryland on Saturday evening, December 20th at 6. And that'll do it for you and me for now. Keep the feedback coming. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Thursday's show, episode 1216, will provide you with more on the Washington Commanders as they on Wednesday are beginning their practice week for their game at the New York Giants this Sunday afternoon at 1. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.
Adam, for you, comparing your feelings about the roster construction last year at this time versus to where you are today going into your second training camp in Washington. Give me your feelings, differences about just how you feel overall about the roster construction, what this team looks like right now compared to where it was last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think we're better. You know, I would.
Hey, it's Lisa Leslie. How did I get here? I prepared for every game and for the years after.
Invest in your future with SPY, the original S&P 500 ETF from State Street, the official ETF partner of the WNBA. Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Visit statestreet.com/IM for prospectus containing this and other information. Read it carefully. SPY is subject to risks similar to those of stocks. All ETFs are subject to risk, including possible loss of principal. Alps Distributors, Inc. Distributor.